pursuit of greatness often leads to failure, and failure can be turned into lessons that help us grow. So let us not forget the failures of our past. On February 2nd, 1952, the Hornet 2 prototype was rolled out to the pad and being prepped for launch. As the rocket ignited, it let out a thunderous roar, and teams on the ground watched as it lifted into the heavens. The spin stability system kicked into effect almost immediately, and after only 9 seconds, this particular launch was more successful than the last. Temperature scanner was malfunctioning at launch, which worried the team, but hopefully the rest of the scientific experiments and telemetry data will give us the data we need to finalize the prototype and release the Hornet 1. Being humbled by the first major failure, the team realized rocket science is not only hard, but it's expensive. And to everyone's surprise, this particular rocket burned all 60 seconds of its fuel, reaching speeds of 2,020 meters a second, as well as capping out at 255 kilometers above the surface, all while carrying 600 units of sounding payload for testing purposes. The spin stability was a little bit quicker than they had hoped for, and that has been noted for changes later down the line. The rocket also veered off course slightly, putting it on a possible impact course for civilian population. Because of this, the range safety officer was ready to detonate the rocket at any given time. As it came back into view, the rocket was breaking apart mid-air. The team sat back and waited for the range safety officer to detonate the rocket, or at least what was left of it. The explosion rang out through the air, and although it was sad to see it explode, they had done it. They had reached the Kármán line, and they were successful. With the success of the Hornet's prototype, the Hornet Mk1 was designed after picking up the XLR-41 engine. Two different variants were made, the MKC and MKSC, one a controlled rocket, the other one using a scientific uncontrolled core. So on May 13th, the very first Hornet 1 uncontrolled rocket ran out to the pad and prepped for launch. The goal of this launch, outside of testing the new XLR-41 series engine, was to exceed 180 kilometers with at least 160 units of sounding payload. Both this rocket was more than capable of handling. After all tests were finalized, the rocket was ready to be launched. It let out a thunderous roar as the new XLR-41 engine ignited, sending the rocket shooting upwards towards the sky. The new adjustments to the spin stabilization seemed to be successful as the rocket did spin, but it wasn't an overly quick spin that was causing issues with instruments like before. As the rocket ripped through the clouds, all ground could do was sit back and watch in awe. After 61 seconds, the engine finally flamed out, successfully completing its entire burn. It would eventually hit heights of 392 kilometers above the surface, as well as exceed speeds of 260 meters a second. Not only was this launch a success, it also exceeded all expectations. Engineers couldn't be happier with what they had done. As the rocket soared into the very reaches of space, data started pouring in like crazy as the analysts immediately started to review what it all meant. Using this information, we'd be able to not only build better rockets, but research more tech and eventually put a man into space. As the rocket came ripping down to the surface, a big ball of flames suddenly ignited in the sky as the aerodynamic forces ripped the rocket apart. The teams expected this to happen, but the range safety officer was still prepared nonetheless to prevent any possible catastrophe from happening. With another success under their belt, the team moved forward to attempt to do a downrange variation of the rocket that they would hopefully be able to recover the probe core of the rocket and test to see how re-entry works at slower speeds. The Hornet 1C, a slightly modified version of the original Hornet 1. This is a controllable rocket with the Argo C probe core attached to it. Sacrificing some delta V to have control of the rocket, still is able to carry a payload capacity of at least 635 units of sounding payload. Not only will this be the first time we've launched a controlled rocket, but it's going to be the very first step in testing suborbital launches, as well as will lay the groundwork to eventually get orbital. One of the ultimate goals is to put a man in the orbit of space and bring it back alive. This rocket is the first stepping stones to that goal. So on October 3rd, the rocket was rolled out to the pad and prepped to be launched into the skies. The team did not know what to expect from the launch, as it would be the first time they ever tested any type of controllability on a rocket. Although no commands would be given at this time, as they wanted to test the connectivity as well as the reliability of said core. As the XLR-11 engine ignited, the rocket let out a loud roar and started to fly towards the heaven like its brothers before it. The ground team watched patiently as the rocket soared higher and higher, as they wanted to see what the capability of their new project was. As the rocket managed to burn all 61 seconds of its fuel, the teams waited in anticipation as the command to detach the top part of the rocket from the base core, as a separation command would be given as soon as it reached the top of its orbit. The rocket managed to soar 255 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, reaching speeds of 2,367 meters a second. According to all telemetry data, the separation was a success. Now all the team had to do was wait for it to hopefully survive re-entry so they could recover the data and use it to further improve all future launches. At approximately 11 minutes into the flight, the command to arm the parachute was given, as the boats that were borrowed from the United States Air Force started circling around the predicted area of where the probe would land. All eyes were in the sky as the probe started coming back through the atmosphere. As recovery teams looked up, they saw a ball of fire flying through the sky. Dread set over. With a loud explosion, the sky cleared and they saw the probe still alive and in one piece. The booster must have followed its path and exploded on re-entry due to aerodynamic stress. That was not the concern. The concern was recovering the probe, all the data, and hopefully achieving a suborbital re-entry. The recovery team managed to track the probe as the parachute deployed, and the probe started to slow down as it tumbled through the thicker parts of the atmosphere. At approximately 5,000 kilometers above the surface, the chute should fully deploy and hopefully bring the probe down in one piece. After seeing the full deployment of the parachute, the teams relaxed and headed towards the destination at which it was falling, approximately 534 kilometers from the launch site. The teams had done it. They had successfully launched a rocket into a suborbital trajectory and recovered it. All the data that they picked up from this launch was going to push them even further, not only with technology, but understanding of how space works. Relieved they accomplished their goal, the team sat back and prepared for their next endeavor. As word has come back from the R&D department that the X-1 cockpit was officially released by the United States Air Force for testing purposes, the Aerospace division quickly got to work on something different. As the year came to a close, the team looked back on what they had accomplished. They had triumphed over failure and learned from their mistakes. They've officially sent something into space on a suborbital trajectory and brought it back safely. This was only the first steps for this young space program as they pushed to go farther and farther. With the X-1 cockpit now at their disposal, a new program has started. Project Sparrow, which was slated to start mid-1953. The first time they'd attempt to send humans into the sky and hopefully bring them back, leading to the first steps of eventually sending an astronaut into space. I haven't figured out how to do the outro on these yet, so I'm just going to do it here. I'd like to thank you guys again for stopping by. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like always, feel free to give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more. Maybe I'll figure out an outro later, but at this point, it's the end of the video, so thanks for stopping by, and I hope I see you guys again next time in the year 1953.